This is Pete Bickford. I am your host for this wonderful version of the ComicBase live stream. Thanks for everyone for coming. Before we get into it, I'd like to remind everyone, please hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already for the video. It really helps, especially in these first few minutes of the show, to get the word out to everyone else who hasn't gotten a notification on it. And thanks all for being here. We got a few things to get into, but the main story for this one is we really want to hit your questions. So please post them in the chat. I will hit as many of them as I can. And I think that's about all I want to say. So let's see who's here. Hey, Mike Beam, nice to see you, man. Oro, it's like I like how everyone starts out with these very detailed weather reports of where they're at. But anyway, this is awesome. I'm glad it's like the weather's finally giving everyone a break out there, and because it's still hot as hell out here in Tennessee. I don't know what to tell you. Hey Rob, Greg, competent man, nice to see you again. Jet City, and I love this part here. Let me see if I can get it going on the bit here. Gregory Hayes says, "Welcome to the 61st meeting of the IHECTIHAP Society. I have enough comics to know I have a problem." Man, I think we have the T-shirt. There you go, man. I'm like, we got to work out some art for that one, but I'm sold. I think that has to be what this thing's called. Awesome, guys. All right, let me close some windows so I don't get super confused. Mike, I like the part where, like, someone ends a comment with, dot dot dot. It's like, "Hello Pete, dot dot dot." It's like, all I can picture is that someone's like furiously typing the rest of this very long message, but I don't know. It could just be saying hi. Anyway, guys, let's get to it. All right, so there is actually a fair amount of ComicBase news. There was a question earlier on about appearances in the books field. Longer story, I'll happy to get into it if you want, but basically it came down to, you normally don't think of books as having like comic character appearances or things like that, and honestly, I think we were very conflicted about the whole thing in the end with ourselves here at ComicBase, to the point where, like, we built out the database routines to store appearances, but when it came time to like actually building the interface to work with appearances on books, we kind of like half-assed it. I'll just be honest. So there is a new build of ComicBase out there right now, which should be doing less half-assing with appearances in books. Should you feel like you want to note all the appearances of a particular book, I'm not 100% certain I get the use case, but I definitely get where if there was a book that you were transferring from a comic collection, and you mentioned like I don't know, some giant novelization of comics or something like that. Let's say it was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer novel, right? So it's an all-text novel, but you still want to know that this was an appearance of Buffy Summers. Yeah, I get that. So it would, if you transfer the book from a comic to a book, it will carry over the appearance, but until this very latest build, which I believe is it 1888? Until then, if you went and tried to edit it, the appearances would kind of drop out if you went into the detail view, and they shouldn't do that anymore. That being said, the build is all about 15 minutes old, so if you're not in a huge rush, you might want to give it a little bit. We are playing a lot around with installers right now, so I'm trying to get those so that they do a better job of upgrading one version to another. But anyway, so that is a thing. Thank you to whoever raised the question in the forums. I don't typically have enough time in my day to browse the forums myself, but there are folks from Human Computing who do, and they try to point out messages to me that are particularly relevant and so forth. That one came up in the forums, and I'm glad we finally got that taken care of. Let's see here. Let's see here. Hook like puny spush button. Yes, absolutely. All right, Andre. Hey, nice to see you, Ed, Jeff, and everyone who's coming in here. All right, and Greg asks, how are you making out with the excessive rainfall in your part of Tennessee, Pete? Yeah, I guess it was Humphrey County. It's a couple counties east of here. Just got clobbered. They got something like 17 inches of rainfall in a day, and it was just really just tore the place up. But I'm out in here in lovely Williamson County, and I don't, we did okay. It was rainy, but honestly, I was driving up from Florida for most of it. So by the time I got into town, it was just more rain. So it had been raining on the entire trip. So it didn't seem like anything new to me, and my house wasn't underwater. But I do thank you everyone who checked in on me. I got a lot of messages on that. I guess it made the news. In the meantime, I was sitting out there in a house with, I had electricity finally, but no TV, no media, no anything. I was really off the grid for a couple days. Yeah, I came back and just, trying to get back in touch with World. All right, other things going on. Well, speaking of the installer and the uninstallers, so as we're getting ready to go into the ComicBase 2022 Burning Man, whatever its final name winds up being, the next major version of ComicBase, one of the things that, it's funny because it seems like it shouldn't be that big a deal, just from the outside world, but the installer program that you have to make in order to go from one version of the program to another is surprisingly complicated, especially these days where you guys might have noticed that one of the bigger changes we made with ComicBase 2021 is the installer itself is actually pretty small. It's maybe between 20 and 50 megabytes depending on which version you're downloading, and so it downloads really quickly, and so you can get updates really quickly. If there's a new version, it's not a big deal to download and install it, because we took all this stuff that's really big, which is to say, if you have the Express Edition, there's a bunch of bundled in pictures that came with it. If you, all of us have a kind of stock version of the database that's kind of rolled up, compressed, that when you make a new database, that's what you start from. And that's huge. That's hundreds of megabytes for all that stuff. We figured, though, is if you took all that stuff that really doesn't change that much, the stock database, all the stock graphics and the whole thing, the pictures they're bundled in, if you move that into a separate file, which then got installed as it's called a prerequisite when you first run the whole thing, then you only need to install it once. You can download that as you go the very first time, and then all the subsequent program updates can go really quickly, because then you're only downloading just the program part that changes a lot. The problem, of course, is now we're going to a whole brand new version of the program, and we want to make sure everything as you're going forward gets kind of rolled up and updated all at the same time. And yeah, that's a bit of a dance. That's something that we're working on this week. So don't be surprised if you see a lot of different builds of the installer come out this week. Doesn't mean, this, if you're watching the prerequisites, doesn't mean you have to try them all, because what you'll mostly be seeing is just installer testing. So, you might see the version number of the program increment, you might not, but you will probably see, if you're watching, for preliminary updates, you'll probably see a lot of action on that in the days ahead, because we want to make sure that as you're rolling forward from one version of ComicBase to the next, that it's as smooth as we can possibly make it, even though it's a multi-stage installer upgrade blah 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 thing. I'll tell you, it's kind of a mess, or at least the programming of it is kind of a mess. All right, let's see how we're doing on everything. All right, cool. Phoenix, figure out to get the water from the East Coast to the West Coast. Yeah, I guess so. I guess the West Coast is burning up right now. Oy. It's always something, isn't it? Okay, so other things going on. I would like to get a quick sense from the chat. Subject came up in a conversation with our staffers about the minimum price on in ComicBase for a comic book. There is a sense, and we use this partly as just a gut check when we're posting new content. Beforehand, if anyone ever tried to post a comic book whose guide value was less than 25 cents, it just told us that, man, no one has priced this book yet. In case it ever slipped through, you'd get like some, someone submits some British penny, magazine or something like that, and if it came up with with a 7-cent default cover price, it'd be like, okay, whoops, we missed a few when we were doing our initial pricing. I'm thinking, as we go forward, 25 cents. I can't think of a comic book in our world today which should have a guide price of 25 cents. It just seems utterly unrealistic. I don't care. I mean, we're talking about near mint books. I mean, if you're talking about a not very valuable book and it's ripped in half, then yeah, sure, that could sell for a quarter, or even a nickel. But is there a near mint comic book on the planet that should really be priced less than $1 at this point? Is that now should that be our floor? I guess the obvious questions are things like free comic book day comics. Can you ever expect someone to list them in their collection and have at least the guide price of those be less than $1? Now, what I'm asking, remember, keep in mind, is no one's going to stop you from selling them for a nickel or a quarter or whatever else. That can be your selling price. But should the guide price ever be less than $1? And if yes, what should it be? Should it be 50 cents? The old minimum for us was 25 cents. But I feel that was set decades ago, and I just been in a lot of comic shops since then, and I've never seen a place where I can expect to get a new comic book, of any description, that was actually, it wasn't just a bin book, that I can expect to see that for less than $1 really. So, but let's see what you guys all say. All right. Yes, and thank you, Greg, for reminding me on the excess TV things on storylines. That is the very, very first question I'm going to be hitting as soon as we get down to that. But just got to take care of the ComicBase news first, but then we'll get on to questions. All right. I also had another question while I'm asking you guys questions. And by the way, please chat in the once you have a chance to think these things over for a minute or two, please post your reactions in the chat. I really want to see what people think, because some of the stuff is like when you're making a question like that, you really do have to make it without a ton of data, from people. For instance, should the guy, there are questions that are kind of endemic to doing any kind of pricing. Like, for instance, should the default price of everything be cover price? Is it or should it be a cover price plus a cent? So should $3.99 books always be priced at $3.99 or $4? Or maybe if they're really unpopular, should they be less than that by default? But I mean, some of these things we just have to take a whack at it and see how the market reacts. But it helps to get some snap reactions on folks on these things. So please do post it in the chat. But the next thing I'd love to get like kind of a gut sense of is when you're setting up the program. So we talked about this a couple live streams ago. Is we have a lot of when we're doing tech support for y'all, and people call in and they're new to the program or things like that, and they have certain questions about, okay, well, how do I get this going? How do I get that going? And there's always like a set of settings that we always kind of want to be like, well, you want to check that, and by the way, have you thought about doing it that way instead of this way instead of that way, and so forth. Because a lot of times people will get the program, they'll just sort of randomly hit a couple menu items to see what they do, and then they'll be sitting there looking at Action Comics and album view, and they'll wonder why the program's so slow or something like that. Or they'll never configure their backups, or they'll never set up Sidekick. Or one of the biggest ones for me is when you go to download updates. I strongly, matter of fact, we're changing the language in the next one where it will say recommended. But when you look at let me pop it out to show it to you. And I gotta be careful here, because I'm going to leave the prompt or get to the storyline thing. I'm leaving that up in there so I don't just bury it with another question. Let's go over here. When you go and say I'm going to pull down an update. All right. And let's see, you get this one right here. So the question of like, do you want to allow us to remove obsolete series and obsolete items? I would always tell everybody that unless you have some very special use case in your head, the use case would be things like I'm using the database to track action figures, including ones I don't actually have. That would be the one time I'd tell someone don't check those off, because it'll remove them because they're unknown items. But otherwise, I would definitely tell you, yes, absolutely, let us remove things whose name changed over the course of their listing times in ComicBase, or so forth. Same thing goes to, I would always suggest to people, go ahead and let us make corrections to existing data. It does change data. That's why the reason its default is off is we never going to change your data by default. But I would always tell a friend, absolutely, check that stuff unless you have a really special reason not to. But the question for all y'all is, so if we identify 4 or 5 of these areas where we're like, look, as a pro tip, I would definitely review, this setting, that setting, so forth, before you really get rolling, like gradings, right? How many people know about grading sets or have gradings that aren't part of, say, CGC? How many people use PGX, so forth? But what if we gave people a little dashboard panel and call it, we just like quick, getting started or wizard or whatever we call it. And what it basically did is just kind of led you by your hand and said, hey, let's check over a few things to get you going before you really get rolling. And you, of course, hit cancel if you're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. Just leave me alone. But would it make sense to have that as a as like a menu item under settings? I've seen some websites do this where it's especially for things that are just fiendishly complicated like firewalls, where it's like, all right, here's the basic stuff that anyone would want to configure at some point. You may want to do much more involved configuration later on, but anyone should want to at least look through a few of these things. Does that make sense as a menu item under setup, which presumably we would also allow you to, we'd prompt you to go to it the very first time. When you first launch the program, and say like, all right, let's get some things started. And then give you that little dashboard of let's check over your grading, let's check over your backups, let's check over your how updates work for you, but then presumably we can also allow access to that wizard at any time from the setup menu as well. It would just basically be like a special master setup menu, which just kind of encourage you to go to different things. Or is that utterly stupid and redundant, and it's just in everyone's way? Hang in, call out in the chat. Let us know what you think. All right. Before I get into it, let me get a little reaction from folks on some other things. All right. So, let's see here. Kathy D points out a buck is less than the cost of a first-class stamp. I don't think that's quite true. I think first-class stamps are still, 50, 60 cents now? God, it's been that long since I've mailed an actual letter. But I do think that's one. Let's see here. Yes, Greg says, the comic book that I wrote, drew, and stapled when I was in 4th grade should probably have a guide price of $0. Nah, don't say that, guy. I was like, if anyone was looking for that comic book, do you think that they wouldn't pay $1 for the privilege of getting it? I don't think so. Let's see here. Jesse Comics says, I'm okay with $1. Mike's also buck minimum. A lot of people seem like that says like that's pretty much it. Greg says, I say let the market decide. If demand for comic solo, it doesn't sell for $1, then it isn't worth $1. If it doesn't sell for 25 cents, it was worth 25 cents. That is true. I guess the question for us is, where do we, at the very least, initially put any unknown comic out for? Which, I guess we break down the question more. It's like, so I mean, just a quick review of how comic pricing works in ComicBase is basically our job when we price things is to start the pricing discussion with the world, right? Is get close enough so that some commerce can start taking effect. At which point, so let's say I've got a brand new comic book here. We Don't Kill Spiders. Just happens to be the one on my screen right now. Now, this one's brand new comic book, $3.99 cover price. I see no reason why, and the publisher clearly didn't either, that you shouldn't start the discussion at $3.99, right? So if you put it out there and people buy it and they buy it for $10, well, it's going to rise in price. And if it turns out that the only people who sell it are people who discount it, so they knock it down to $3.50, then $3, then $2.50, and if you eventually discount it down to the point where it's, let's say it's 50 cents, if that's the only time this thing sells in the history of that comic book, it's going to be 50 cents, if we let it do its thing. The question is, when we first start the pricing discussion, at the very least, should our minimum be $1? So yeah, it's a question I don't know the answer to, but I figure it's like worth asking at least. Okay, let's see here. Kathy says, might want to go with 99 cents value, easier to find the default than $1. Yeah, could be. Note to everyone. Let's see here. Oh, yes, Greg wanted to point out, if you have something in stock, the update will never delete it, even if it's an item that's not in the master database. All the more reason to check those preference boxes. Yes. So even if I have a title that I've never heard of, I'm listing autographed copies that I've got or something like that, that is not going to be in the master database at that point. If you've got it listed as quantity 1 or quantity greater than 0, it's never going to delete your copy. The one time I felt really bad about this is there was somebody who was using ComicBase as an action figure database and put in just a lot of information in their own database, and then thought, hey, I wonder what this setting does. Click the thing, and then because he had been tracking all sorts of action figures that he himself didn't have. It then, of course, on the next update said, well, this is an unknown, title, toy box, whatever issue, blah, blah, blah. And so it just deleted that stuff, and he had to go back to a backup. So I was like, if there's ever a question of deleting your data, we are always going to ask you, beforehand and try to be as clear as we can. But yeah, I mean, it is a saying where, like, that's why I can't default it to doing it automatically. Otherwise, if I could default things the way I think that they're really useful, I would always do that. But if that more useful thing involves the potential loss of data, I can't do that just in good faith, because maybe someone's got that weird case that I'm not thinking of right now, and I can never throw away their data unless they know that it's getting thrown away. Otherwise, bad things happen. All right. Oh yes, and I just asked the reverse of the same question. This is please make sure the quantity has to be 0 when you're removing obsolete issues, because otherwise they'll stay in. Let's see here. Doug Wren. All right, this is a great time for me to footnote the discussion. I'm going to get right back to you, but this is the part where, because I forgot it last time out, I'm going to answer the question that everyone was waiting for on the last live stream. I'm going to do that one first. All right. So, but I'm going to come right back to you, Doug. All right. So the question was, all right, there was a storyline entry that came across where somebody clearly just found the publisher listing or just been really, really crazy thorough. But the storylines came as listing as introduction by Louis Simonson, introduction by Roy Thomas, The Savage Sword of Conan, Volume 1, number 62, 281. It goes on for like 4,000 words. This is insane. This is not what we want to see in the storylines field under any circumstance, even for like a giant omnibus thing with 1 million posts. The reason you'd never want to list your storylines like this is because at some point in life, first of all, I mean, is anyone going to ever search for a storyline called Introduction by Louis Simonson? I would say no. That, to me, that doesn't even belong in the storylines field. To me, that's a note, right? Same thing goes for Introduction by Roy Thomas, right? If you're talking about where something came from, like The Savage Sword of Conan, Volume 1, number 62, from 2 in 1981, that, again, that's a note. That's not a storyline. It gives you context for, the content that's in something. But, I mean, think about how you search storylines is you're typing in parts of a name. You're looking for something like Batman Nightfall or, Arkham Asylum or The Infinity War. So you're going to type INFIN, etc. And you're expecting to see storylines that start with Infinity War. No one's going to look for a storyline called The Savage Sword of Conan Volume 1. That's not useful to anyone. It's not a good way to go. Now, when we finally get to the Wizard Fiend of Zingara, which is a Conan story, that is a storyline. That is perfectly good, and if you put that in, it would automatically get indexed as Wizard Fiend of Zingara, and so if anyone's looking for where that is, they'll see it both in this compendium and they'll see it in the original thing. So it actually negates you having to do the cross-referencing of where the original source was, is that much. So unless you're just feeling really slavish to the detail, I wouldn't personally bother doing all this note work of saying where every single thing was once printed in, because we'll find it anyway, as long as our notes contain that to start with. Now let's talk a little bit about how storylines, how they should be captured, right? So let's pull up something like this. Let's go to the detail on it and go to storyline. So let's say this was the Wizard Fiend of Zingara, right? Now, if you're going to have more than one storyline, which you're going to put in there, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One is you can just put it on another line. But typically, what you would do is you would go semicolon, which would be shift, return. But typically, you would go semicolon and then this is another, this is a plot, semicolon, and then typing, Nightfall, Nightfall Descents, whatever the thing is. But you would, it's important to realize that the semicolon after each one's, or if you manage to put them on separate lines, that also works, because those get then automatically translated into semicolons. That's what says that I've got multiple storylines in this field, and it'll index each one of these separately. You don't want to just start typing just a crap ton of like rando data in the storylines field, because again, you got to think about how you search for it, right? It's, I mean, you want to be able to make it so that if I hit save and go on this, I want to be able to type Wizard Fiend of Zingara and find the darn thing. I'm never going to find it if you just have unstructured text in this field. All right, I'm going to cancel out of here. Let's go back to the original question. So so yeah, this is the long version of the short version of the story is, please don't submit stuff like this. If we accidentally accepted something like that because we were going too fast or we didn't see it closely enough, yeah, we would be taking that out. But if you are going to do very complicated storyline stuff, put everything on a separate line or separate it from semicolons, better yet. But make sure the things you're actually putting on those different lines are actually storylines. Don't save the notes for the notes. There's going to be a new field in the next version of ComicBase called item description. If it's something that describes that this is, the yellow shiny, red velvet cover, whatever the thing is that describes what edition this is, signed by Mark Waid, that will go in the item description. But let's keep these things in their right fields, because that helps the searching. It helps keep the clutter down. But yeah, I'm putting 4,000 words of description in storylines. It's just not helpful. So anyway, that is the long answer to that one, and I hope that took care of it. Let's go back to Doug Wren's question now. All right, and Doug says, if I upgrade from Professional Archive and download covers, will my scans of my collection be replaced? The answer is, if you had a cover and you say, if you had a cover and you say download over it, it will be replaced. So if, let's say, you've got a cover of we don't kill spiders, and you go in, you right-click and you say download cover, the bigger cover that'll be part of Archive Edition will replace your smaller cover that came with Pro. Now, let's say you had a special cover of your own. So I've got, I don't know, I just have the cover that's of my copy or something like that. In which case I'd say do not click download cover on that particular one, because you've already got as good a cover as you want. It's the most specific cover to you. You leave it be. It's fine. Now, that's when you're doing individual cover downloading, or when you're highlighting big runs and saying download. When you're doing the install pictures off of the 4 DVDs that come with the Archive Edition, when you do that, you have a choice as to whether or not you want to replace existing pictures or not. If you have pictures that you want to keep, just click just uncheck the replace existing pictures, and it'll leave your existing pictures alone. But anyway, so that is the answer. All right, let's see. All right. More discussion about the priceless early works of Gregory Hecht on the comic thing. Realistically, we've got some very, very small press comics. A guy named Michael, one of our users, has been submitting more mini comics in the last couple of months than I could ever have dreamed of. He must be one of these guys who goes to shows and patronizes the entire artist alley just to check out stuff. But I mean, it's cool to see. Honestly, this is like one of the things that, look, regardless of the overall artistic merit of the whole thing, I love seeing young artists get their start on stuff. I mean, look, if I had a comic published by a 4th grade version of Neil Gaiman, with an early story that he wrote on the back of a thing, come on, that thing would be priceless. You know it. So yeah, no, I'm in favor of that. All right. Yes, and Lance asks, on the minimum value, are you talking about for a near mint comic or for Buck Comics Beat to Death? We're talking about the near mint version. So yeah, obviously, if you have the same comic in poor, if it was a buck in near mint, the default when it's poor is going to be like a nickel. So yeah, that's about it. Okay, and Jet City says, Pete, when you move back, it appears you become blurry to me, but when you get closer, it comes back to focus. I apologize. I will stop doing this stuff. We have a relatively narrow aperture on this focus, so I mean it's one of those things where I usually try to sync up the focus right at the start of the show for where I happen to be sitting at that moment. But if I get animated, this is bad talent management on my part in terms of my acting skills or presentation skills, is that I do tend to talk with my hands and bounce around a lot and stuff like that, and it makes it crazy for the camera to keep track of me. So I'm gonna try to not do that. All right, let's see here, and this is Greg says this is National Whiskey Sour Day. How did I not know? This is a very important this incredibly important holiday. All right, let's see. Anything else? Oh, by the way, if you guys would, when you send comments and you want me to get them and you're not just chatting with yourselves, please go was it ampersand ComicBase TV, and that makes them pop out straight to me, and so I can, as I'm going down the chat, which is going faster than I can usually read, I can keep up with them. All right. Oro asks, when we enter a title, do we put the leading article, the, etc., or we put it in comma, the? Go ahead and write it just as the blah, 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 because when we index it, we'll automatically flip the articles to the back. So it'll, crazily enough, it actually even works for foreign articles. So, so it'll work for die, der, das, el, la, ler, in about, 15 different Indo-European languages. We'll automatically do the flipping around of stuff. All right, let's see here. And, okay, more stuff on storyline. Okay. And by the way, this is never bad advice. For the title of a comic book, do as Steven says. For storyline, enter as it appears. Don't put the article at the end, and that's exactly right. Okay, all right. Databases are a bit complicated. Hell yes, they are. Okay, moving on. Let's see here. Oh, dumb, goofy item just from my end of the world. Doing some garage cleaning, and for reasons that I will make official in a while, we have an excess of Blu-ray cases. Now, it's a good reason why we have an excess, but let me just go ahead and more or less give the game away. We have an excess of single Blu-ray cases. So if there's anyone out there in the viewing audience who finds themselves in a need of single Blu-ray cases, please reach out. Bickford at human-computing.com. We will cut you a deal. In the meantime, you can also find them on eBay. So, we need to clear out the old to make room for the new. And you guys can probably guess where this is all going. But anyway, it's a good thing. All right. All right, so, and by the way, please also ask for comments. Otherwise, we're actually going to finish early today, and that is a good thing. Okay, the only industry news I wanted to hit is I want to talk just a little. Oh no, I'm sorry. I had one more question that someone sent in. I want to address before I get to that one. I'm sorry, I didn't write down his name. He said, I just upgraded. I had the Express. I moved to the Pro, and I am still getting my version is expiring message after I've already renewed. And I'm looking at my account, and it says I'm renewed. So what's up, comic dude? Should this ever happen to you, so you're using the program and you are still, you get the, hey, your thing, there's an update available, but your subscription's expires, you can't get it, and they say, okay, great, I'll go ahead and spring the money for the update, and then you do that, and you see your expiration date went up, but you're still getting prompted that you're still expiring. A couple of things that this typically is, and if this isn't it for you, please give us a call and we'll troubleshoot with you. But honestly, it's usually pretty simple. As typically the folks going that have done one of two things. One is they have more than one account on ComicBase.com. Sometimes this happens. People sign up once, they forget their password, they forget whether they signed up, so they just create another account. The problem is their registration information is tied to the other account, and they're logged in with a different account at that point, so the login information you put when you start up ComicBase is in a different place. If that happened to you, give us a call. We can put your accounts together. We basically say choose your favorite user ID, the ones you have, and we'll merge them all into one, and then you update your login information in ComicBase, and then everything will be happy again. That's one thing. And then the other one, it sounds really dumb, but it happens more than you'd think, is they kind of they're still using the wrong version of ComicBase. So for instance, let's say you had the archive edition and it was expiring, and you upgraded and you went to the 4K edition. Well, you might still have both icons on your desktop, and if you continue to punch the archive edition, well, that one expired. Your 4K archive edition, the new one, it looks like a crystalline logo on the and if you actually look at the fine print, it says under the icon, it'll actually say ComicBase 4K Archive Edition, something like that. That one is the one that you renewed to, and so that one's fine, but your old one is still expired. It doesn't, when you renew, it doesn't, or when you upgrade, it doesn't update every version of ComicBase you had to have the new expiration date. It just gives you, the new version of ComicBase, which whatever edition you just bought with a year on it. But like if I had an Express and I upgrade to a Pro and I launch the Express again, the Express is still expired. The Pro is the one you want to be running. So it's funny how much that comes up, which is one of the reasons that we're spending so much time working on the installer to make sure that we uninstall lesser versions and things like that in a nice way as we go. But if you're using a version that it didn't automatically uninstall the old version, that could also be the thing that's happened to you. So that was the other question that was sent in. All right, let's see here. David Bowie says, I'm just about to purchase the Express Edition to catalog my collection for the first time. What's your best advice for getting through the task for someone new to the software? The short version of that one is have a look at, there's a 5-minute video we recorded a while back that I've been wanting to re-record with the new version, for a long time, but all the basics still hold up. But if you look on ComicBase TV on YouTube, it's also linked from the software under Help. There's our ComicBase Tips and Tricks YouTube channel. If you look at that, it will take you to ComicBase Pro Tips number 1. It's like 5.5 minutes long, and it kind of runs you through, here's all the 6 ways to get stuff into your collection really fast. That's probably the most useful tutorial I can point you to, and I can certainly answer other questions for you later on. Beyond that, basic things, if you've got the ability to get a barcode scanner and get that rolling, it's going to automate a lot of your life. It's definitely good. On a physical level, if you have sorted your comic books ahead of time, it's going to make your filing infinitely faster. That's another video I would love to make at some point, is just a comparison, because it illustrates basically computer science concepts brought into real life, where if you need to organize things that are already in kind of a sorted order, or manipulate them, sort them, file them, whatever you got to do, as opposed to I'm just running everywhere with one random comic after another. If I have to go from Avengers to Spider-Man to X-Men back to New Mutants. I mean, if I'm doing that, and I'm going to run myself ragged. Whereas if I take the time to get them together by a title first, my whole life, everything about dealing with that comic book is going to get so much better. I mean, like orders of magnitude. So some physical organization on your comic books is going to pay off hugely if you can bear yourself to do it. I know a lot of us, when we get ComicBase, I've got so many comic books that are just everywhere in our lives that it feels like doing anything with them physically is just way too much work. But even if you just do something simple like, I'll put all the ones that start with A together, or all the ones that start with B together. Even those kind of gross cuts do a lot to cut down your load. And then the final advice I'd give to everyone is, if you got a knowledgeable teenager in your life who knows about comic books and you can pay him to do it for you, think about it. Because, yeah, it's, ComicBase makes it possible to inventory large collections, but that doesn't mean that sitting there filing and inventorying and labeling and doing all the things you gotta do with comic books, that is not the most fun you're going to have with your collection. And so, unless you just really enjoy revisiting everything for comic after comic, depending on how far it is, bring in some help. I mean, if you can do it, that's always wonderful. All right. Yeah, Greg says, P was cleaning out his garage. Guess we found more comics. Yeah, no lie. Man, so I found out they had 39 silver sponsors to Free Comic Book Day this year. So, I mean, I thought this was crazy. I thought I'd never seen so many Free Comic Book Day comics come in ever. And it was nothing alike. It was like double what some years are. And also DC was doing things like shipping 30 copies of each of them to everyone, or 25 copies of each of them to anyone. So no matter what you had actually ordered. So something like 750 comics came into my world in like the last 3 weeks, and I'm just, the filing that was in my life was like when I got finally back on top of it all yesterday. Yeah, you're damn right, I had a couple of years. So anyway, I was happy to have that done. All right, so Oro says, are we able to upload books to ComicBase? I did a few, but they haven't shown up. Are they being vetted for inclusion? Pretty much everything goes. No, books, absolutely, you can submit them. We don't really, there's no reason I could think of that we would reject a book, except if it doesn't satisfy the the qualities of being a book, in which case we'll typically try to send you an email saying, hey, this is the story and so forth. The short version is, just because something has a heavier binding doesn't make it a, what we would call a book. So for instance, comic books, we're used to them being these floppy magazine type things, but they don't stop being comics when you start having them in card stock. They don't stop being comic books when you collect an omnibus together. They're still in the comics because they're basically a graphic story, told with an interposition of words and pictures that the kind of like the Scott Adams definition of what a comic is. As long as they still are telling a story with words and pictures interposed like that, then we're going to classify them as a comic book, no matter what the binding is. Going into things like books, if let's say it's either a picture book, so Clifford the Big Red Dog, right? It's what you're doing there is you're telling a story with words, and you're just putting a picture next to it once in a while, but you don't really have that interposition that happens to that makes it a comic book. That would just be a book. Same thing goes with like novelizations of comic characters. So there were various Superman, Batman, Buffy the Vampire Slayer novelizations where they might have tipped in some cover art or some tip-in art or whatever else, but just because it has a picture somewhere in the book, if the whole thing is still 50,000 text words, that's just a book. Now, lastly, if it has a periodical nature to it, and this is one that we're a little bit slushy on, but if the whole thing is going to come out every week, every day, every fortnightly, every month, whatever else, if if it looks anything like a magazine, as we're used to thinking of it, typically we would then put those in the magazines. Now, if it was something like a set of encyclopedias where you get the next volume in 3 weeks or something like that, that's still going to get listed in books. But if it's something where it's really like, okay, this is the latest edition of Guns and Ammo or whatever that is, that's going to get listed as a magazine. Same thing goes for like say X-Files, the official magazine, which is something we used to track under comic books because before ComicBase 2020 there was no other place to track these things. There only was comics, but those things all got moved into magazines later on, which by the way is one of the things, if you're coming from an old version, that I would tell people, it's like, hey, look over your titles when you do an update, and if you see things that aren't where they should be, but there's like for instance, I was helping a guy out who, I've got Playboy still listed under comic books, and that's where I put my inventory, but it's now Playboy magazine is a magazine, and so what you want to do is you want to use the transfer command under the edit menu to here, let me switch and actually find it so I know what I'm talking about. Change title media type, to change it to be, go to your comic book version of a Playboy, change it to a magazine, and then it'll say, oh, hey, there's already a Playboy magazine. Do you want to merge your inventory into it? Yes, done and done. It'll get rid of the old bogus comic one, move it into the magazines, and you'll be good to go. But anyway, so back to your question. Or if you have submitted books and we haven't taken them yet, it might be because they're the wrong type. So in other words, if you submit a comic book but it's really a book, or you submit a book but it's really a comic or so forth, at that point it's actually really hard for us to take that one and morph it later on. So we'll typically say, please fix on your end and move it back. But in the meantime, beyond that, typically it's just, we overlooked it, or whatever else. But please go ahead and submit it. Okay, and yes, Andre says, yes, if most of your comic base barcodes, get yourself a scanner way faster. That is absolutely key advice. All right, let's see here. Agent of Camp, nice to see you. Let's see. Okay, and Agent of Camp says, so MegaCon knows a lot of people were asking more money for the new standard edition books. Look, it's an open issue. This is one where I'm open to revisiting the whole issue of the newsstand books. What those are is from basically kind of early-ish 80s through very early 90s. It was typical to have a comic book get published in both the a newsstand variety and in a one that was meant for straight for the direct market. So the way you would tell these ones apart is the one that was meant for the direct market, which is to say comic stores. In order to keep them from being returned, what you would do is you would put, so where the barcode should have gone, you'd put like a little picture of Spider-Man or a DC logo or whatever fit your fancy right there. But the main thing is you didn't put a barcode. Now, the rub for us, right? So for many years, nobody considered treating these as different, because who cares where they were initially distributed through. You could also find that, say certain North American comic books went through different distributors, right? Are you going to make the argument that ones from Curtis distribution are worth more money than the other one? Well, you'd never go to that problem. But what happens is you've got the ability, because of how the barcode was treated on these ones, to at least know that they were different. That's the original reason you'd know it was different is that the ones that had a Spider-Man on it couldn't come back, right? If the 7-Eleven bought them and they had the newsstand, the barcode on them, 7-Eleven, if they didn't sell them at the end of the day, they could, at least in theory, rip the covers off or send them back or send an invoice and return them and get part of their money back. But they also didn't, they didn't get as much of a discount. The comic stores didn't. The whole idea of the direct market is the comic stores didn't have the ability to return them. Well, all right, so for many years, the comic market ticked along and didn't treat these as being distinct in any meaningful way from each other. So if I had, the Spider-Man, 278, that was the newsstand one that had a barcode, and I had the one that had a picture of Spider-Man in the corner, nobody cared. There is a retailer who made a lot of noise about wanting to make these separate, and of course, he of course was claiming that the ones that were had the newsstand on them were far more precious than the others. Now we looked into this with John Jackson Miller, who from Comicron, who tracks circulation numbers, and from what I could tell, the last time I looked at this very seriously, is the circulation numbers were not backing up the alleged scarcity of these newsstand editions, and so in basically toward the front of that era, there were far more newsstand ones than there were comic shop ones. Toward the end of the one, it flipped, but the theory of the newsstand ones way better also relies on the idea that, oh no, anyone who bought it on the newsstand, they couldn't have been a comic collector. So what they did is they immediately shredded the comic book up when they were done, and that's why they're all gone. So the ones that are left are rare. That's what this one retailer was claiming, and again, he's got a megaphone, and he makes a case for it. So I mean, I'm kind of, I'm not a disciple of this theory, but at the same time, I also have to listen to the market, and if the market is like really, if a lot of people who aren't just on this guy's mailing list, but if a lot of people start really saying, no man, I only want to deal in in the newsstand editions of this thing, or and I'm willing to pay extra more and so forth, and I really care that it's distinct. So if there winds up being a lot, we've got kind of a friction problem on this one, where like right now is if we as ComicBase were to declare, oh no, we absolutely see it this retailer's way, those things are utterly distinct as comic books, and we need to treat them like variants or some other way from each other, then immediately what we do is to all of the really millions of comic books that have been entered into ComicBase, probably millions that are of just that era, is we've cast your entire collection's cataloging into doubt, because if it doesn't matter which one we choose. If we say the direct market one's the regular one and the newsstand one's the variant, any comic book you've entered in these ones stands a pretty good chance of being wrong, especially during the front of the era, where the more common ones were the newsstand, and toward the end of them, so forth. So we're casting chaos on our own customers, which I'm not sure if that's a good idea. And then the other one is we definitely we add a lot of friction to the comic market in terms of like, well, okay, now we're buying off on the premise of this whole thing, and now everyone's going to go to war over this stuff forever. So, I don't know. It seems like, just from what I'm watching, there are people who really care. It seems like a pretty small piece of the market. But I'm not saying it's going to stay small. And I'm not saying that it's going to always be something where the right decision is to kind of ignore it, which is what we've done. I believe Overstreet still is of the opinion that this is something that you should pretty much ignore. But honestly, if the market at large says no, damn it, we demand that newsstand be treated separately, then at some point, then we've got to make a tough decision. And unfortunately, this is one of those things where I don't think there's a way to kind of split the baby. In other words, if we go ahead and we just spin out an extra 20,000 variants for all these comic books from Marvel, DC, Archie, etc., from that era, and treat them like they're completely separate and important because of whether they have a barcode or whether they were originally put through 7-Eleven or whatever else, then like I say, we at that point the die is cast, because because whatever our listings are, they map to a lot of people's real collections, and so I don't want to take on something that's going to make their collection wrong retroactively, unless I'm really sure the wave's behind me. So that said, look, it's an open issue. It's not something I see as a closed issue at all, but I just want to explain my nervousness in wanting to embrace it. So if anyone has an idea of how we might embrace it without screwing up the universe, that also that could be good. So anyway, that's a real thing. All right, so let's see what else we're going to be. Agent of Camp says, thought you were going to be in Florida. That was the plan. I'll tell you more about why I'm here right now later on, but that's for next episode, because it's a story. Let's see here. Okay, I got a question for you. Please go ahead and follow up with me on email. Thank you. Been in COVID isolation for the past week. That sucks. Spent sorting my collection alphabetically. Good on you, man. All right, well, there you go. All right, let's see here. Did the merge once and all had duplicate issues afterwards? What you'll get if you do a merge is you won't have duplicate issues. What you'll have is, let's say I've got a comic book that's Playboy. Let me think. I'm trying to think of something that's kind of harmless to try this on. Let's go Buffy. Buffy contre les vampires. See, the problem is I don't have a good example queued up on here because this database has already been fixed up, but let's say I'd gone in and I was in this guy's case where I went to Playboy magazine. So now you might see, by the way, when we're going into here to like Playboy's okay, Playboy presents Sex and Other Late Laughs, which was basically a cartoon book. All right, this one right here is still listed as a comic book. Playboy's Greatest Covers is a book, but let's say I'd had Playboy's presents Sex and Other Laughs, and let's say I had Playboy's Greatest Covers as a comic book, and then I move it to be a book. I changed the whole thing. Now, if I do that and it says, well, there's already stuff there, do you want to merge it in there? It'll merge yours in there, and you'll see a second line for each of the issues, which is the one that carried over from your database into the database. But you'll notice that all the other lines will have quantity 0 and so forth. And if that does bug you, you can highlight all those ones. They're a little bit redundant, but because of the way the merging works, we're not sure if they're redundant, because there might be data that was unique to your copy that we want to make sure we didn't blow away. So you'll see, like, for instance, like you'd say you'd done it with this one over here, is it Weasel or whatever I'm on, Weeble. If you might have seen a second, issue number 1 appear. One would have a quantity 1, which was mine. One would just be the quantity 0 that was there before. In which case, if you want to, just highlight the one that you don't want, hit delete, boom, blow it away. But no, it's not going to double your inventory up, but it might duplicate the lines. And I would consider whether or not we want to do an automatic, or at least provide like a file tool for cleaning up of redundant issues, because there are various things people will do sometimes that'll cause them to build up multiple lines of something. Like sometimes people will import a database multiple times or something, and so you wind up with multiple multiple lines that basically are all the same issue. So you could remove the one that doesn't have the quantity attached to it or so forth. Let's see here. Andre says, are you adding action figure and sports cards in ComicBase? The answer would be not right now. We did look into it. We ran away from it for, I think, pretty good reasons. But yeah, so it's something where the database is definitely set up to be able to take on at some point. But there's most of the work has already been built out to do stuff like that. But it's it's a bigger, it's a bigger thing that we want to take on at the moment. The action figures are weird because they don't as easily fit into series with numbers and stuff. That's a little odd. More importantly, though, it's a fairly small number of folks who have action figures that they have enough of them they want to catalog them in anything. I believe the last time I looked at it for software that was for sale that cataloged action figures, like the #1 program had sold some like 280 copies, like all entirely. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a big opportunity for us. Sports cards, almost an opposite problem. They do fall beautifully into series. They're very similar to comic books in the way they're organized. Problem is, individual sports cards generally worthless. They are not what they were, and it's just one of those things where I don't have a lot of interest in something where the act of inventorying it takes more of your time than the value you get out of it. I mean, I want to make it so that, it takes you 5 seconds to look up and hit a 1 or something to enter a comic book. You've just logged a $3 to $5 comic book on average. If you've taken the same amount of time and you've logged a 3 to 5 cent sports card, what are we doing? It's just hard to feel like you're helping the world. And then, of course, there's the insane amounts of work on the back end to get a cataloging source and do all that stuff. But I mean, we definitely were going to go into all this stuff, and we veered off at the last minute when we were getting serious about shipping ComicBase 2020. So not saying any decisions for forever. We didn't remove all the ability to do that stuff from some nascent code that's buried in the DNA of ComicBase, but we didn't activate it either. So that's where we're at. Yeah, I mean, the theory newsstand hard to find primo condition. Could be something to it. I don't know. And Asian Camp says slowly converting my collection by adding an NS designation. Yeah, that's probably, if we did embrace something like that, that's probably where we'd go with it. Is with a dedicated designation for the whole thing. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'd be nice if there was one rule that was always true, which is like if the market was convinced that the newsstand version was always more valuable than the barcode one, and that oh man, I ordered the barcode one, but I got a newsstand one. That's a good thing, right? If you bought them back and forth, that'd be easier to kind of justify making bulking out the listings by adding newsstand to it right now. But as of right now, it seems like a pretty narrow appeal, and I'm given the hit it's going to take to all of our customers, I'm not sure if it goes forward. If I had to guess, so you stick a gun to my head and say, no, damn it, you're adding newsstand tomorrow, how would you do it? I would say probably doing exactly what you're doing, which is to say take all your comic books that are the newsstand copies, add them in as special newsstand edition, and log them that way. That'd probably be the way to go, given the current thinking that the people who are interested in the market seem to be having for them. Because again, a lot of this is being driven by one guy, who's basically, he's declared that all these things, the newsstand version, this is the precious one. Now, yes, make an educated guess which version he's got a lot of, and then you will know where his precious is. But anyway, but if he says, no, the one I just happen to have a lot of is far more precious than your pedestrian regular copy, look, to the people who believe him, then they're hunting for the newsstand ones. The people who don't give a crap, at that point you take whichever one you got. But if you were going to have, if the thinking was always that the newsstand one is always more valuable, then that'd probably be the way that you would go about rolling something like that out. That being said, we're hesitant for a reason. All right, to do action figures, I think it's best to do it by character, not set, but send notations for set. Yeah, it's hard. Action figures are one of those things where, like, I even have some of, and it's like I'd love to do it, but so it goes. All right, let's see here. Okay, so that is, I think, all about I want to say about that. If there are any other questions today, I'll do get into them. In the meantime, I did want to just say a little bit about something which is interesting. It came up in the news just now. Um, I'm reading off of, I believe this came from Bounding into no, I believe this is from ICV2. So we've been talking about Free Comic Book Day forever, and in particular, one of the 39 comics that came up this thing. Time to find my camera. Was this guy right here from Silver Sprocket Comics? It looks like kind of like a tween adult, a tween kid comic, whatever, just from art style and things like that. If you look very, very carefully, back by our friend, the barcode, I get the focus on, I guess it's right about here. Will it autofocus? No, it will not. Okay. Anyway, but if you look there, in Time Wars, there is an M for mature back there, but honestly, if I were just looking at the whole thing, I'd be like, Tales of a Grown-Up Nothing, okay, you got some Teenox going in there, I'd be thinking, okay, it's T for teen, it's whatever else. Anyway, so the Farmingdale Public Library on Long Island, New York, has apologized for giving a comic with adult imagery to a child on a Free Comic Book Day. The comic, Fun Girl, Tales of a Grown-Up Nothing by Elizabeth Pitch, was one of the FCBD's silver titles, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, long story short, the library apologized. We're sorry. We bought a lot of comic books. We didn't really know what we were getting. Shouldn't have gone to your daughter. So so bad and whatever else. I thought, well, that's interesting. In this day and age, you're getting complaints because your kid got a slightly too old comic book. What's the deal? So I thought, well, I'm gonna read Tales from a Grown Up Nothing. We have lots of these, and it's like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. I mean, it starts with kind of like a weird feminist sex joke. It immediately goes into nudity, masturbation. I think there are sex toys. By the time you're 4 pages in, you're into like weird. It's like a weird Silverman. Like it's like the desperate set she'd do when she knew she was bombing, and where all the comedians just tell dick jokes. You're into your Free Comic Book debut, which apparently is meant as your promo for let's see here. Fun Girl by Elizabeth Pitch. It'll be 250 pages of Fun Girl hijinks, available October 21st from your local comic shop. So this is basically the promo for that. And dude, you're leading with the dick jokes basically, and it's something I'd never want my kid to read. I mean, honestly, it's not worth time reading yourself just because it is not funny. But beyond that, it's just tasteless. I mean, like I don't know another way to put it. And the idea you give this away on Free Comic Book Day, that you don't make the branding on the mature level really prominent. Yeah, of course the library gave it away by accident. I mean, a lot of what we interpret as the maturity level, if we're not going to read everything that comes by, is we do look at the art style, we look at things like that. I mean, if it's drawn with 1 million speed lines, I'm thinking more teenager than if it's got if it looks like Donald Duck, right? But I mean, suddenly Donald Duck is talking about his time in the bondage camp with Mickey. I mean, it's like, well, I got a problem, don't I? Just as a parent, because we're not going to read every single thing ahead of time that we expose our kids to. It's not feasible. So, I mean, look, you guys know me. I am a free speech guy. I believe that Elizabeth Pitch has the you will forever in America have the right to make this and distribute this and do Mazel Tov, God bless. And there's probably someone who digs her stuff, if Elizabeth Pitch. That said, dude, show a little taste. I mean, like, come on. I mean, it's the same way, like, let's say you're kind of a raunchy comedian, right? And, you're looking out over the audience and you see that there's like a family with small kids in the front. You don't go for the dick jokes. I mean, and that's what Free Comic Book Day is. It's our ability, no matter how edgy you are in your normal life, but it's your chance to reach out to a broader audience and bring them into your world. Now, once you bring them into your world, you can go ahead and telegraph in any number of ways that, hey, the stuff out here, it's kind of mature, whatever else. But you don't start by just getting weird and creepy and offensive, like on page 2. Because when you do that, basically you're setting up everyone around you to get slammed. I mean, look, I believe in freedom, but every freedom comes with a responsibility. I mean, that's why it gets to be freedom. Is it's counting on us acting like frickin' adults. And when you're sitting there going like, it's I mean, the alternative is, if no one will take responsibility, then totalitarianism, which basically is the state saying, I'll take responsibility for you. That becomes more justifiable. When you take your freedoms and you understand that with them comes the responsibility to not be a dick, then it's harder to justify state intervention on this kind of stuff. It reminds me very much, and there's a story of Gordon Lee in 2005. The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund Fund, which I've given money to over the years. It's a defense organization for people in comic shops and things like that. When people want to come in and get weird about the selling of legal material. Gordon Lee had given away a copy of I guess it was a free comic book day comic, but he gave it away as like a Halloween promotion. But it was, let me see if I got my notes here. Alternative Comics #2. It was from Free Comic Book Day 2004, and he accidentally dropped it into, he gave it to a kid, and kid shouldn't have had it. It had imagery. It had basically non-sexual male imagery, is the way the lawsuit puts it. But that then got in the hands of an overzealous prosecutor down in Georgia. Gordon Lee spent 3 years of his life and $100,000 defending, having given a kid a comic book that, if you were to look at it, you wouldn't think that there's anything that's going to get me sued in this comic book here. I mean, it'd be one thing if it's like, yeah, Hustler Comics, it's like free comic book day. Well, you know what you're getting then. But I mean, don't set up the people who are supporting you to get raped. I mean, that's a dick thing to do, Elizabeth. And anyone else who does stuff like this. I mean, so yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is not. This is not great, folks. I am a big fan of Free Comic Book Day. I'm a big fan of supporting independent artists, things like that. And if she was writing for her own crowd and it was clearly labeled as to what you were getting on the whole thing, you'd have a lot more sympathy from me right now. But as is right now, first of all, it's weak sauce. I mean, again, any comedian who gets out the dick jokes, at that point, the show is over, and it's a good time to go ahead to the bar and get a drink and try to, until the next set comes on. I mean, that's just weak. But I mean, if that's the edgiest thing you got to say about anything is getting into that stuff, well, then you're just not very good. But beyond that, let's say there's someone who just lives for that kind of stuff. Well, then at the very least, be upfront about who my target audience is, and don't sandbag the people who are just trying to broaden out the comic reach, by essentially, luring them into a position where they're going to give that to some kid by accident and get in a lot of trouble on their behalf. So, yeah, not cool. I mean, it's just, again, you got the right, man. I'm always going to protect your right to say it, and I'm still going to say dick move. Anyway, that's strangely a strangely pissy take from me. I apologize for that, but there you have it. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, more stuff on that. Content should matter for FCBD, but real deals should be ahead of time. Yeah, I mean, I got nothing against there being like T for teen, whatever else, but I mean, it is good if the front of this thing communicates what you're doing for it. I mean, just, again, don't sandbag the artist. I mean, if I'm seeing something, it's like, nightmares and hellscapes with tons and tons of dark art and whatever else, and I'm like, okay, I'm thinking, if this is the Halloween giveaway comic, this is not going to go to the 4-year-old. Like, that helps. But if you pretend to be, if you come off as one thing, which we're going to look at very simple line work and stuff like that, and we're going to think, oh, okay, you're going to go, basically you're going to give me some rando angst about being a teenager or something like that. Okay, fine. I'm not going to sweat too much if I give this to a 13-year-old. But man, I'm sitting there, I've read it, it's like, oh crap, I hope I didn't actually give one of these to a 13-year-old. I mean, nice thing about Atomic Avenue is you're not allowed to buy on the system unless you're over 18, but just to ensure against things like that. But I mean, that literally states I'd get in jail if I gave, like, if I had that left over from if I had that left over from Free Comic Book Day, and at Halloween I give out comic books to kids, and if I didn't know what this was and I gave it to a 5-year-old, yeah, I could expect the police at my door the next day. That's a jerk thing for someone to do. By the way, for what's worth, Gordon Lee back in 2005, he was horrified at the idea that he'd given out something inappropriate to someone. He said, "Look, I'll apologize. I'll make a public apology. I'll do whatever you want." But unfortunately, at that point, the prosecutor was just off on a tear and decided, well, now it's a good time to make an example of him. And there are people like that. So don't set up your friends. The people who are trying to give you a break, don't set them up to get screwed on your behalf just because you want to be edgy. It's just a dick move. All right. Anyway, let's see. Yeah. So it says, yeah, local comic stores make sure the mature FCB comics have a sticker on asking mature readers request. Yeah, it's fine because I mean I looked through some of the other ones that were even like mature or T for teen, and even then typically you didn't lead with your worst stuff. You know, I mean, sometimes, you know, like if you're like The Boys, yeah, you're like, okay, we're here to shock. Yeah, that could be a thing, but man, you know, it's I don't know, man. That's about it. Okay. Oh, and yeah, anyone talking about Superman and Robin being gay now? Yeah. So bored. Okay. All right. When can Control Z be used in ComicBase? It can for doing atomic level changes. So in other words, if you're in a like a text field edit and you haven't left it, you can Control Z to get back at it. Unfortunately, just due to the way that databases work, once the change is committed to the database, you're not going to be able to come back. It's not like text editing. It's like everything you do is hitting disk all the time, and very difficult, especially because changes typically have snowball, you know, things that can happen. Very, very difficult to implement an undo scheme in a database. That's why you almost never see them, because, like, let's say I had deleted Weeaboo right now, and you know, because I deleted the last issue of the issue, it's going to also delete the last title. It's, you know, there's multiple cascades of changes that happen as a result of just literally one text, you know, one action of delete. And it's just, man, you have to work so hard to make undo work in those circumstances. But that said, if you're just typing, you know, and especially if you haven't left field, yeah, Control Z will work. All right, let's see here. I think that's about it. Yeah, and on the gay and the whatever thing. Yeah, it's the way they're dancing. I know the way Marvel's dancing around this crap is just saying, wow, it's a multiverse, right? And on Earth, blah blah blah. It's the one. It's like our, you know, universe, except everyone's gay. You know, and you know, it's like, oh, yeah, I'm just so lazy in terms of the so-called creative process on that one. I mean, I'm just like, I'm so annoyed with it. I literally, if these guys worked for me as writers, I'd be like, is this all you got? Because if that's all you got in terms of writing, get the hell back to Tumblr and get out of my place. Because I mean, write some real stories. Don't just say, I'm just gonna, you know, race, sex, gender identity, whatever, swap regular characters, and I'll be edgy. By the way, you guys might have noticed that, like, you know, Batman, was it Batman Urban Legends #6, where they made Robin gay? Yeah, I offered, hey, anyone still got it? You know, anyone wants a copy at cover price, sell it to you for cover, no problem. Still in my collection, just saying. People aren't exactly beating a path to your door to get this crap. No, this is you guys entertaining yourselves in ways that is not super entertaining for the public. And just cut it out. And honestly, editors, what are you doing? You know, it's at a certain point, like, I mean, look, doing it once is like, oh, wow, edgy, I've never seen that before. It's like, that opens up some new doors. Doing it all the time, you know, to every character you make just to get shock value out of it, you know, from amongst the easily, ooh, look what I did. You know, that is such a tired play. I used to have a roommate when I lived back in the Bay Area, San Francisco. You know, and he'd been in the closet forever, and he decided one day, it's like, all right, you know, my mom died, I could finally come out and you know say, I'll tell everyone I'm gay. I'm like, dude, we've known you for gay forever, man. It's like, you know, we are the least shocked people on the earth. And then, but there'd be this weird game he would do for like a year afterwards. He'd be like, ooh, did you hear the edgy thing I did last night? I'm like, yeah, dude, still bored. You know, like, yeah, this it's just tired storytelling, guys. Tell us a real story, and the story is not just that I turned black, gay, whatever else, you know, Superman, I'm now a black lesbian. It's like, bored, you know. So anyway, that's about it, guys. Let's move on. Okay, all right, that's all I got. All right, man, 2021, gotta get the clicks, and that's a good place to close it. All right, guys, have a good one. Next time out will probably be from Florida, unless something very strange happens, and it'll probably be not nearly as cool a background. It's like there's nothing in that place. So anyway, we'll talk to you then. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.